someone needs to write what AI means from proximity, not from up
Yeah.
here, not
Yeah.
from the what ifs. I call like a lot of these books like what if, how to get ahead, how to do all these things. Let's talk about the now. Let's talk about reality.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So these are great leads I'll be having these conversations with to get to those books that have made the most impact on who they are, their business, their work, their personal life, whatever it may be. All those worlds intersect. And my guest today is David Dean. And David is an author, speaker, and business AI realist who explores how artificial intelligence reshapes work, judgment, and accountability in organizations. Rather than focusing on AI capabilities, he examines the human elements that remain essential, how people navigate uncertainty, where accountability lies when AI assists decisions, and what holds organizations together when technology accelerates faster than clarity. His philosophy is grounded in a simple truth: AI doesn't understand confidence, risk, or consequence. People do, and that's why they still matter. David, thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, John. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So, David, I mean, timely conversation as it pertains to AI and people and workforce. Obviously, we see it all over the place. We see the implications and we see the ability of AI platforms and LLMs and all of it, and how exponentially it's growing, and the policy and the lawmaking and where data centers are going to be. So obviously, this is very fresh on people's mind. But before we get to that, I want to get to who you are, your background, your story. So who are you today? Can you provide a little more obviously than the bio, but what kind of work are you getting into today? What does your day-to-day look like in the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I do professional consulting, and as a professional consultant around the AI space, um, I s- uh, I'm a kind of an entire gamut type of strategist and architect, for organizations. I know not only architects AI solutions, but I also help architect kind of the company and understanding on applying AI within an organizational standpoint. So change management, governance, security, especially around productivity, the use of productivity and AI with that. And so that's where I work with small and large companies. Most of my background comes from larger enterprise organizations with that and working through the issues and challenges, especially in regulatory, types of situations with that. And AI really makes that interesting, to deal with those kind of dynamics. But I'm really a problem solver. That like this is what I do really well. It's joked around a lot that before AI, there was me, with it. Like, people naturally kind of came to me and it's like, hey, I'm having this issue, a problem, with it. Doesn't matter what it is and doesn't matter how sophisticated. David, how would you address it? How would you solve it? That type of thing. And I have this T-shirt that says, people use me like AI essentially with it, and that's very true. My history has been kind of like that, and so it's been an interesting journey because prior to AI, I had a number of different roles and played a number of different avenues in that regard. But it was like now I'm moving to this AI realm, which is a completely different conversation, but it's also still also the same conversation with it, and
Yeah.
which is kind of what originally led me to put that book together.
So in order, and I find that fascinating how somebody becomes the person to go to for that kind of approach to productivity, to work, to efficiency before obviously what we know today in AI and how that's building out. So that makes me even more curious about your story. So my next question is always what's been your path to now? I typically like to start around high school to get a sense of interests, and then how the career started to develop, whether it was going to higher ed or whether it was going into the workforce directly. So from then to now, what's your story look like? How is it that you got here to be this person, this author sitting in front of us?
So I can definitely say that when I was in high school until now, a lot of change happened. I'm a very different person than I was, but to a certain extent, I'm also still the same person with it. You don't lose out on certain aspects of originality with it, but you do change. And I think I was a very much more passive type of individual when I was in high school. But I was also a very dedicated individual. That never really changed. Um, the when I was in high school, I was a decent student. I was not a straight A student around that, but I was, AB typical student going through that journey. And but I also worked, 20 hours a week, for most of high school with it. And I played sports and I did those sort of things. But I ended up paying for like first half of my college by working while I was in high school with it, kind of get ready, to be able to make that journey happen. So I already established a really solid work ethic at the very beginning. Um, but it also helped me understand because I worked in fast food and that kind of stuff. It helped me understand that um, the kind of life that I wanted to go for, especially from a working career standpoint, is um, I wanted to help people. I mean, that was, despite, from a frontline level position like that in the food industry, there's things you like about it and things you don't like about it. But the thing that gravitated towards me is what did I like? I liked helping people, and being able to have that type of engagement with it. So, um, but I also, at the time, in the um, early 2000s, late 1990s, essentially, the getting into software development, IT was really kind of starting booming and that kind of stuff. So I knew I wanted to be a software engineer at that point, within that's where I initially chose to go. Um, I ended up when I got into college, I ended up changing majors part of the way through because um, at the time I didn't enjoy development, like actually being the hands-on developer process of that. Even though it was fun and was very interesting in that regard, I was a lot better at solutioning and diagnostic with it. So I transitioned to IT instead, and with uh, minors in business and management as a part of this because it
What
still
did you
came
start
down
off in?
software engineering.
Okay, okay.
Um, yeah, and so the university had just opened up a information technology degree, excuse me, as a part of this process mid-flight, and I was like, I think this is more suited to what I like, as I said, because as I said, I'm more into diagnostic and solutioning and working with people, and I felt like um, at the time, and I wasn't educated enough that I wasn't going to work with people enough, and it would be kind of too disconnected, from that. So I transitioned to that and was able to graduate. But my work ethic didn't really change during that time. I still worked, during that time in college while going to school with it. Um, and I really tried to mesh work and play with it because I went to school at Oregon Institute of Technology in Klamath Falls. Klamath Falls is not necessarily known as a college hub, with lots of different activities in comparison to like some other university locations and that kind of stuff. So you have to figure out a way to keep busy, otherwise you get into too much trouble and that kind of stuff as a college student.
Yeah, yeah.
So so I participated a lot in extracurricular activities at the university, and ended up becoming a part of a troupe that ran a television studio and did a whole bunch of um, uh, videos and news reporting and all that kind of stuff, and doing that, as a hobbyist, with it, and then eventually moved into actually being a job at one point because the university had it made a student job, and I was able to help pay for kind of some of the rest of the school relating to do that in my later years. Probably spent a lot more time than I probably needed, in that area with it, but the one thing that it gave me is it gave me like some understanding on like how to like manage and run and deliver in a business as a part of this because you know there's all these dynamics that we have to work. We have a timetable we have to deliver. We all have to work together in order to be able to meet those expectations with it. Sometimes we have to go an extra mile. Sometimes we have breathing room relating to it. And I think the difference with that is that a lot of the people that I was essentially managing, or not really managing, like, the projects and stuff we had were peers, like friends of mine and that kind of stuff. And so as like kind of someone who was in a leadership position there, that was a very interesting dynamic. If you've ever had to like be like a manager over your friends, that's that has a whole set of dynamics in comparison to like in a workplace traditional workplace style manner. So there's a lot of things we had successes and a lot of headbutting in regards to like making things happen. So I didn't really understand that and realize that until I actually got into the workforce and like what the value of that learning opportunity was, to be able to kind of help mold, being able to help people. But with that, what we were doing is we were helping make people laugh because a lot of the stuff that we did on the side is we had a lot of productions that were similar to like SNL's digital spoofs, skits and that kind of stuff. So we had a lot of fun making them, but it was very stressful trying to do develop videography and all those different types of things with it. And it, uh, but I'm still helping people. And the thing is because I'm making everyone laugh, especially in a situation where like we're heads down in books, we're trying to make things happen with it. People are looking for an outlet. How can I help people to create an outlet for them, to do that? And that's kind of what really drew me into that dynamic with it. So um, then I graduated, and that just became a part of me through that process. And I did some stuff, later on, but time and realities of work and having a family and that kind of stuff. I eventually kind of drifted away, but I never really forgot, those types of experiences.
David, for you, before you proceed after graduation in your story, for you, you had mentioned like the fast food jobs helped you with understanding, servicing people, providing service to people. Where did the technical side of your curiosity, where did that part come from? Was it something you saw modeled in your family? Was it, mostly innate? Where did that originate from? Where did you see that?
So that originated from is my dad was a math teacher. And of course, math teachers were always one of the first people, especially like in the 80s, one of the first people to get computers in a high school. Were they always up to date? No, but he had just stacks and stacks of like, old DOS, Apple computers just sitting in there. And,
Yeah.
as a kid, you know, essentially to a certain extent, it became a babysitter. It was like, what does this do? Can I play games on it? How does this work? That kind of stuff. So, kind of just being in hands-on that environment, kind of drew me into, the early stages of computing and I like computers and I like gaming. I was into gaming consoles when I was a kid and that kind of stuff, with it. And, as well as general pop culture kind of, things during the time. But, that's kind of where, um, it kept my attention, with it. And, I built my first computer actually when I was 10. Um, you know, the the fun part is like when you have a bunch of computer parts all over the place and like, well, I'm going to put this together and see if I can get it work. I failed a lot, through that, but I eventually succeeded and learned how to do different things with it, um and kind of grew from there. And then especially just from the technology trend, where things were going, that's what kind of ushered me into more of a computing type of avenue. Um, uh, but it was you know, self environment provided an opportunity, but mostly it was self-directed for the most part,
Okay. Okay.
with it. So that's kind of where it came from.
All right. So I'm sorry. I had to jump in to ask that question, but after graduation?
Yeah. So after graduation, it was around 2005, and unfortunately at the time that was when one of the technology downfalls occurred. We had a big dip at that point. So getting out of college, it was hard to find a job. All of us graduates were having a harder time, with it. And I think that's the one thing that I and even this to this day, I wasn't a networker. I'm not that personality type with it. And so, some of the people who were more well connected did get some opportunities. For me, it was, I had to dig deep. I had to look, I had to find, and I had to take jobs, because I needed to work, that kind of stuff with it. So I took some, kind of initial preliminary jobs until I could find the real position with it. Well, the interesting thing is, um, my very first technology position, um, the way I classify it was actually being a high school teacher. Uh, I did some like technician stuff like in the meantime prior to that, but I was like, an opportunity came available at the high school that my dad was working at the time, and so I was like, hmm, I really like engaging with people and I really like inspiring people, with it. So why don't I give it a shot? I have a lot of knowledge, I'm confident in the things that I know about. So I was a high school teacher for a couple of years, and I actually really liked it, with it, despite the dynamics, on how to, be a teacher with it. Um, Being able to teach students, and so I taught students in at the time like HTML programming and computer JavaScript development, as well as I also helped start a robotics team. First robotics team. Don't know anything about robotics at all with it, but I helped with the microcontroller programming aspect. But I kind of helped run the team with it. And I was sitting there thinking about this because originally it was a Girl Scout troop that approached me and says, "Hey, we, you know, we're all about to graduate, but we don't want this team to die, essentially, with it. So, would you be willing to like sponsor it as part of the school and get brought in with it?" And I said, "Sure, like this sounds like a lot of fun and to do that." And it was, even though I was only a teacher for a couple of years, and mostly that had to do with funding cuts, at the school level, is where I had to eventually exit. I still kept the robotics team going, after that for another 3 years after that, and I think I was thinking to myself, like, man, if I was in high school and I had something like this, I would have eaten this up. I would have loved
Yeah.
this, type of thing.
Yeah.
And but they really need someone to kind of help organize and coordinate and work through issues and problems with it. So a lot of project management aspects of it, and because of that, um, it really helped me work with it. Dynamics of parents, dynamics of mentors, because we had to bring mentors in to help teach the kids on how to do full metal fabrication and um, you know uh, uh, AutoCAD, all those different types of things with this, and trying to manage and coordinate and fund, all these different types of things. A lot of time, from a hobbyist standpoint, that's kind of what was my hobby, with it. But I was like sitting there thinking, man, what am I getting? What am I getting out of this? But what are the students getting out of this with it? And I mean, just the experience, around it, and especially from a workplace dynamic that program offered, because from a competition, I know a lot of people are into sports and competition with it, but I think the one thing from an applicability in the long run, it taught them that I needed to be able to work with a person that I never worked with before, and we need to cohesively work to solve a problem or issue or challenge with this. And even in the competitions, it was set up that way. And that's the reality of the workforce. You don't know who you're going to work with, but you still need to be successful, with it. So how do you work through those issues and around it? So a lot of this natural soft skills that came out of it really, I was like, man, this is super rewarding, with it outside of this. And I had students that were a part of this that went on to MIT. Some of them became doctors. Some of them became, I helped someone even published a book, self-publish a book about the team as a part of that process. And I had one student who, when he initially joined, he was just going to work in his parents' business the rest of his life. Like that was his work plan, with it. Because I think they ran a restaurant or something like that. He's now like a major VP for a mechanical engineering firm at this point with it, and he would have never had an opportunity like
Yeah.
that with this. And so this is where I, kind of really help ground like value and change and being able to provide opportunities and understanding with it. Um, because in all reality, it's not about me. It's about everyone else I can help um, bring about change for them. So, and then I will just have the understanding of value of like what I was able to help them on their journey. That's the satisfaction, essentially, what I was looking for with this. And that really hasn't changed. Like that concept is one of the main reasons why I put this book together, is to help other people.
David, for you then, I mean, you had mentioned that working in fast food, that exposure to service of others helped build that servant leadership kind of mindset that you've spoken about. Can
Mhm.
you say more to that though? I mean, was it, did you sense that as you were serving people, the depth of the importance of that? Or is the way you're talking about now just kind of in hindsight, seeing these little milestones of service that you had? Like when did it really cement for you the power of that actual service and seeing it and saying it in such a way as you have, as you've shared here?
Um, I think it's a hybrid of the two. From a frankness standpoint, before I left to college, I was offered, like to be like a general manager of this. They wanted me to stay. They didn't want me to go to college because I was such a ideal person, for them to be on top of it, deliver expectations, all that kind of stuff. And I was in high school, at the time with it. So I think the what it really helped me understand is that um this is not what I was meant for, with it. Like, if I'm this good as a high school student doing this type of thing, like within a very short amount of time, where that instant trust and confidence in being able to deliver and provide, I really need to go somewhere else, to do that with it. So that means I have something to offer, to people. And so I think at that point, like that's really what reinforced me to, keep going to school and that kind of stuff with it. Um, I don't think it wasn't until I started really working in a more traditional workforce avenue. But I'll also say when I was teaching, I think some of it sprinkled in. Like that kind of gave me the confidence to like I could teach, I could make this happen with it. Um, I don't think I'd spent any time just kind of reflecting on like it was this,
Yeah.
until a
Yeah.
little bit later with it. But I did make some decisions at that point, even when I'm 18 years old. So
So then moving on from the team itself, the team that you kind of kept going,
mhm.
that you spoke about, that all these people kind of went off to do all these amazing things in technology. From there, what did your path look like to now?
Yeah, so then I finally really started getting into being in, in the IT realm specifically, like the more traditional role. And so I went and worked for a university, doing managing like lab machines, and OS images and applications and deployments and making sure that they're all available and accessible by all the students as a part of this, and software changes and all that kind of stuff. And also I was kind of working as a hardware technician as well, with it. So it was kind of a hybrid of like a system administrator as well as a hardware technician type of role with it. But I had um I think like something like 5, 6,000 machines that I had to manage within the
Wow.
organization, and you had changes from university professors, that were happening regularly, and you'll be able to plan and make sure and test everything, nothing breaks, all that kind of stuff, and everything's available and working. And for me, it was kind of the success is like, my job is to make sure that these are available, functioning without any issues and no complaints. That was my goal. That's the outcome. That's the solution that I had to deliver, with this. And so I was like, how can I make this better? How can I solution around this to make processes more efficient?
Hmm.
Automation around these different types of things. So I spend a lot of time behind the scenes. Like, there's got to be a better way, on some of these things. So outside of my initial understanding. So I spent some time doing that, and gave me exposure on kind of like mass deployments, and risk understanding in all those different types of avenues and planning and education. And I eventually started doing more and more from a system administration and security standpoint with it, and then moved into um, the public sector, working for a prison system. And this was in Oregon. So I worked for the Oregon Department of Corrections as kind of the next career jump with that. And that's really kind of what positioned me around the productivity space. I was kind of generally there, but not like focused, like,
Yeah.
supporting productivity for the business. And what does that ultimately mean? So, I'm primarily a Microsoft expert. In my career, that's where I've done most of the things in that realm, whether it's security or productivity, servers, etc., relating to that, as well as an architect long run. But the focusing on like, okay, so I'm here to support these technologies for the business, and they need to be available, they need to be working. Well, the only way I can do that is I need to understand how people behave with these systems. Because if people have a question, they have an issue, they have a problem, it's not just about understanding how from a back end. I needed to understand how they work from a front end standpoint, but not just like, this is how I click and open up an email type of thing. It's more of like how the business chooses to use it, with it, and the dynamics around it. And, in most traditional aspects, email and instant messages, it's relatively straightforward with that. What really drew me is SharePoint and the concept of what SharePoint has to offer, what a collaboration tool and all the dynamics with it. Because SharePoint, especially at that early, it's and even now, it's a multifaceted tool, for the business. You use it for a lot of different things. Excel spreadsheets are just like that, with it's a multifaceted tool. With it, it's just another avenue of it with more functionality. And so I spend time, as I was having to support things like SharePoint. Why is the business doing this? Like, what?
But are you still talking about your time at the prison system?
Yeah, still in the prison system. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, as a part of this. So I was, because they were asking me questions like, why is this not working, or is this not a problem, or or more importantly, some of these were people were trying to solve problems utilizing these technologies with it. And so they wanted, so I kind of got naturally brought into like, hey, can we put together a solution to help them here, with this? Can we utilize this technology in this way to solve a business problem with it? And so I was like, okay, I started diving into how it worked and how it functioned and how to secure it and how to make that happen, and kind of developing solutions in that platform. But but I had to listen to the business. I had to like understand how the business did its job and all that kind of stuff, and why they wanted it this way. And so now that's kind of where, even though I was solutioning, this is more of that front end. I'm getting close to the business on how they behave,
Yeah.
more naturally in their space. And so I started doing that for a bunch of different business units in the organization. And I'm like, I really like this. Like, I really like this dynamic. I'm being able to engage with the business and solve problems. Can I use SharePoint to help solve those problems with this? Um, so where that really helped me kind of start my journey is understanding businesses and solutions, and kind of why people do the things that they do every day. And that only as I further got into my career, that only grew exponentially, with it. Because it really kind of comes down to this concept of understanding what self-service means. What is the definition of self-service, with it in self-service productivity? And I think that's even more critical now than ever around this age of AI, with this. So,
And it's usually used as an example to show poor management. But
mhm,
when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
mhm,
But in this case, it's a positive example where when you have that insight,
mhm.
that need of those businesses, of the customer, of the client, whoever it may be, is so standard. Not standard in terms of what it looks like, but there is that need across, every segment of the economy, every industry, every field. So when you have that hammer, that ability, that curiosity, that insight, it's like you just look out and you see all the possibilities of people that have the opportunity to learn a little more about their tools. I can only imagine how much that opened up possibilities for you, or just what you saw just based on that insight of that power of that help that you could provide.
Right. Yeah. So, like, I'll come back to this, but if you were to fast forward to today, I've done this for hundreds of different business units and thousands of different solutions within that, whether they're highly complicated, fully developed, full stack development solutions, or ones that are, you know, um, self-service type of solutions out there within the dynamics. I'm pretty confident that, when a client comes to me or anybody comes to me and say, "Hey, I have a business challenge. I have a business process challenge right now. I don't know how to solve it." I could probably ask several questions and understand like how to get to the outcome. It's just what is going to be the best outcome for that. That's where design comes into play. And for
Yeah.
me, just like this is where it really helped, people come to me as being a problem solver and kind of a designer by nature with this. And and I think that's really what that helped. And as I said, this is really kind of what pushed me to write this book generally. But is that's where I'm at. Like you can bring me into, a large company, 100,000 employee type of company and say, we have those problems. I could probably take a look at it and say, here's your actual issues with it, because it ultimately comes down, if you break all this stuff down, it doesn't matter what technology it is. It's all about business behavior and
Mm,
understanding business behavior
yeah.
and why the business does business to begin with. And
Yeah.
and and people get caught up. And that's part of the, from the details of the book. And when I explain some of these things, people forget that. And I needed to help remind people of that. And that's what I feel. Proximity. I think that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
from a different standpoint. There is there's a lot of consultants out there that, talk, has some really good feedback, really different experiences out there talking about at a high level, especially working with executives, but talking about proximity. I think this is where I have to offer. I have been in the thick of it with all of these different business units and all these different types of businesses through thousands of solutions at this point. So proximity and understanding that the dynamics of that proximity really, really matters, especially in this age of AI. And I think that's a differentiator for me in comparison to a lot of the AI consultants out there of talking about or any business consultant in some these types of
Yeah.
dynamics.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the little that I know about AI and having used some of the LLMs, I mean, even though it can be efficient, it can be productive for you. It can be a massively efficient tool. If you're not asking the right question,
Hmm.
it can only do so much for you. And as somebody who's worked in different organizations and has seen different business systems and the IT structure that they've used, it's just incredible how many of them just kind of throw money at the problem,
Hmm.
and they don't really analyze what their needs are. So many times I've seen like intra-agency platforms launched and nobody asked the users how they used it, what they'd like to see, what needed work, any of that. It's just kind of like the wrong people making quick decisions, thinking they're doing people favors without really getting to the root of the problem and frustration.
100%, absolutely. And a lot of professional people out there talk about that a lot. Where I'm going from a proximity standpoint is going down to like another level,
Yeah.
slightly deeper around that. And the like, so what do you mean by that
Yes.
conceptually, like way
Yes.
of thinking with it? And what I mean by that is, and I talk about this is like one of the very first things I talk about in the book is there are two types of contracts in an organization. You have the written contract, which is all of our job descriptions, our company values, our standard operating procedures, how we project ourselves on how the business does business, our projection,
The
PowerPoint,
explicit.
the explicit projection of that.
Yes.
And especially as it gets up to leadership, that is really what's communicated to leadership is that projected version of how we work, how the company works with it. Then you have the unwritten contract, which is really how the work actually gets done. And essentially what that is it's all of if you look at a job description, you have all these official like this is what I do, responsibilities and all that kind of stuff, but always that line at the bottom, other duties apply. Essentially,
Mhm.
that's a catch-all for pretty much
Yeah.
no matter what. I've hired you for this role, and so no matter what happens, you need to figure it out and make it work, type of thing.
Yep.
And really, and I joke about this a lot, but like, how do people deal with those dynamics? That unwritten contract, they use Excel spreadsheets. They use spreadsheets to kind of manage
Yeah.
those issues and problems and challenges around that because they don't have a solution. And so, from this unwritten contract, most people don't have visibility into that. It's all in people's heads, for the most part. Like that's where it's assumed with it. And but and this is probably one of the big reveals from the book standpoint is um it's no longer in people's heads, with it. It is actually recorded somewhere. And AI now has the opportunity to understand those dynamics of actually how work gets done within an organization with it. So you think about all those water cooler conversations, all of those, you have an official process step, and they're like, well, I need to go talk to David, and then David needs to go talk to John, and then John has to do X, Y, and Z, and then comes back to me, and then come back, and then I can complete that official step. That's all those undocumented behaviors, all that undocumented work on how that process actually gets done with it. That's really never revealed in an organization. People are detached because of the written contract, the written
Yes.
presentational aspect with
Yes.
it. So, so what I talk about with this is because this is all in people's heads, understanding that is going to require talking to people. I have to go talk to these people to understand how these things work and how this job actually gets done with it. And there's also a fallout, like when you decide to lay off a bunch of people, who's dealing with the unwritten contract, like how it actually gets done. So all of your processes break and fail through kind of layoffs relating to it. So you really need to
Oh yeah, all
understand.
that institutional knowledge that
Yeah.
churns. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. With that. So this is where I talk about AI now is, and why I call it the inbox is that behavioral record is now visible. That unwritten contract behavior is visible within an organization. And it's what I refer to the inbox is I'm not referring to email specifically. I'm using it as a metaphor, but it's about the official behavioral record of how work actually gets done within the organization is now discoverable in the inbox. And the inbox is that behavioral record is captured in all the communication and collaboration data within a people's organization. So emails, instant messages, meeting transcripts, all of those tell the story of how a business deals with the unwritten contract. So all those dynamics, all those challenges, all those artifacts, that they can out, that is all discoverable now with AI. And it's discoverable not by like just organizationally, it's discoverable by the individual employee as well, within that. So when you connect things like Claude, Copilot, Gemini to my email, my instant messages, my transcripts, now I have a whole nother opportunity of discovery with it. And I have now an opportunity to ask questions. And people have been slowly kind of like, discovering, some of these things, but they never really put a name for it and really what that actually means in the long run for an organization. So this is where I'm talking about now the see what you can't unsee. I use that term a lot when it comes to the book, is because now all these behavioral dynamics within the organization is now discoverable. So what does that mean for a company? And that's where I talk about like AI is an organizational mirror, because it really is at this point when connecting to that information.
David, before we jump to the book in a couple
Sure.
minutes, what guided you from working with the prison system, those different units? What led you to the work you're doing now? What made you take that step?
Yeah, so I realized that I really like solutioning and solving problems with this. And so I latched into this, and I did what I can, from this dynamic with it, is solving business problems, utilizing communication and collaboration data. And so quickly I expanded into like a systems administrator, and still kind of infrastructure, but starting to do more design and development and solving business problems with it. And then I eventually moved into an architect role where I was more of a hybrid type of role, where I was infrastructure, security, and solution in this whole productivity area. So like, how can I solve business problems in this M365 ecosystem with it and utilize all these things? So I tried to become an expert in all of these different dynamics, because I needed to work in healthcare, I needed to work in finance, they have regulatory needs, but I still want to solve business problems with it. So I needed to kind of understand everything so that I could design the right outcomes for people, in the business. And then it naturally, while I still have a foot in the door, with all the infrastructure and security standpoint, I'm shifted much more into the solution development, and grew into larger organizations, dealing with some of those problems with it. And as I said, that's where expanded to dealing with, hundreds of different business units and thousands of different, solutions at that point for my career. But fundamentally, understanding how the business does business didn't change. Change management, culture management, understanding the human dynamics of all these different types of productivity aspects with that, just solidified my understanding, with it. Then I entered uh, in a previous organization into the AI realm. What does that change mean? What does that essentially look like with it? And so I started my journey there to, it's like, I need to understand it myself. So I started journaling, basically like, how do I explain this to people? I need to explain it to myself so that I can understand how to explain it to people with it. And I
Mm.
needed to take all of my lived experience and opinions around this lived experience to translate that, because that's the only way it's going to work, and then I moved into, I decided, I was like, well, um, I want to kind of just focus around AI and solutioning full time as a part of this, because I was still a little bit more into, I still had some foot in from an infrastructure standpoint, but so I decided to go try the consulting world, because essentially I worked like a consultant within
Hmm.
the organization, with it as a direct hire. But now, I'm a consultant full time, helping any business, relating to that. So, and that's where, you know, the AI transition just uh, really amplified on this, being able to focus and understanding an opportunity with this. And that's kind of where I'm at today. And that's what helped solidify my journey in writing to this book, because of some of the stuff that was being put out there. And I feel like I needed to reach the right audience with all my past lived experience around this.
What was the moment or the period in time or the year where you kind of picked up AI um, and really started working in that arena?
Yeah, it was probably about 4 years ago, about that. It was different, at the point. It was more focused around machine learning. I mean, AI has been around a long time in different
Yeah.
iterations, but more so about, I picked up when AI started to become more offered from a self-service standpoint, with it. Like while I was designing solutions around it, from a machine learning aspect of it, the um when I started having to talk to people about like them using I think that's really what sparked me to uh like this is a change management exercise, with it. And I need to be able to explain to a company what this change really actually means, for it. So that's kind of really what kicked into high gear and had me do a lot of experimentation, a lot of research in order to kind of understand what my message needed to be as a part of that.
David, I'm always curious, of my guests, what do you consider your superpower? So I've heard a lot of skills, knowledge, insight, wisdom in the field that you're working in, but what's the one thing you consider your superpower?
Um, I would say authenticity. And the reason I say that is I am the same person, whether I'm talking to, frontline, employee, or I'm talking to an executive of, 100,000 employee company with it. I don't change my personality and how I talk about things and how I deliver things, essentially with it.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, and this is kind of where I brand myself as a business AI realist, because I want to be real and I want to be practical. In this day and age, um, it comes down to risk and reward and ROI around these different types of things. Um, and I don't want to beat around the bush. I want to tell it how it is, with it. And and it's okay to tell it how it is because someone needs to make a decision, with what they want to do and
yeah.
understand the risks around those decisions with it. If you want to get ahead, you don't want this circular aspect. It's like, this is what you need to do. You're aware of it. Whatever decision you make, it's your decision with it. But, kind of that straightforward aspect on that. Um, but I think that's one trait is because I'm authentic consistently, people put a lot of trust in me. Especially when you work with frontline business people, if they understand how you work and your dynamic, and you're consistent with this, even if you don't agree with them as a personality type, they will still trust you
Yeah,
because you're not providing any
exactly.
surprises to them with it. So when I say I'm going
And
to take care
they
of it,
know where you're coming from.
right?
Like they've
Exactly.
worked with you, they know your behavior, they know you won't compromise who you are, they know you're a person of integrity, of character. So if you're telling them, if you're giving them like the bad diagnosis or you're telling them they got to take the bad medicine or they have to undo whatever they've done, they know because you've been so open and authentic where you're coming from that you don't have an ulterior motive. You're
Hmm.
just calling it like it is. So I have a deep appreciation for that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this day and age, and I talk about this a lot in the book, but I think this day and age with AI, especially AI being able to see the behavioral record of an organization, I think authenticity as a skill is going to be more critically important for leaders more than ever now, especially as AI matures with this, and understanding what that dynamic means, is going to force culture change in organizations.
David, one last question before we jump to the book. What does leadership mean to you? What does great leadership look like?
Great leadership means to me is that it's not about me. It's about everyone else that I can empower to be better and help them overcome their objectives that they want to achieve. And that's always been my aspect is how can I help you so you can go on to the next step of your life with this? My When I was a people leader, uh, I always told the team this, like, how can I help you be better?
Yeah.
What are your goals? What are your objectives with it? I don't care what the company wants from you. And that's like, what do you want, with this? I was like, I want to do this. I'm great. I'm going to do everything I can to help you get to the next step. Because the way I see it is that whatever I can do to help them be better, I gain all the benefits while I have them with it.
Yeah.
And but the aspect to think that they're going to be with me forever, that's ridiculous, with it. Change happens all the time with it. But it comes down to I know that when they walk away, that relationship dynamic between them and I did something. I helped them with it, with it. That's value there as a part of their journey, with this. And someone new comes along, it's another opportunity for that, with it. So, so I really believe that that's really what leadership is it's not about you. You may gain the benefits of the success of what all the people that maybe you may be leading as a part of this, but it's secondary, it's downstream. And if you don't focus on your own uh, leadership goals and focus on other people's leadership goals to help you in your journey, I personally believe that's where success comes from.
I love it. All right, David, getting into the book, why don't you introduce your book, the full title, share it, and obviously everything you've shared, you've mentioned the book, why
Mhm.
you put certain things in the book. But yeah, so the full title and then what really pulled the trigger for you to write the book, like when that moment hit you.
So the book is called An Inbox Between Us. Um, and um, what sparked that was uh, I started the journey before I realized I was actually going to do this. As I said, I talked about like I started doing journaling in regards to like, okay, what does this move in AI means? And so you imagine I go on a lot. I live in Arizona, so I go on a lot of walks in the morning, with this, and I do a lot of voice digital journaling, dictation with it. And so you imagine someone walking 4 o'clock in the morning, kind of like speaking out loud their thoughts and their
Yeah,
notes
yeah,
and relating to like, okay, like this is, if this happens, this is what this means. What about these dynamics with it and all this kind of stuff? Like, how do I explain, as a part of this and all these different thoughts, with it and but as a solutionist, I kind of already knew the story that I wanted to tell. I just needed to get it out, with this. But this is before I wrote the book, and and so as I was mostly through a lot of the stuff that I was kind of ground around when I was going to educate and guide people with this, I had where it sparked the moment was I had a conversation with a frontline employee about AI and she broke down into tears while I was talking with her about, AI and what this means. And she's like, I just feel like I'm not going to have a job a year from now. And I feel like I'm just going to be replaced, you know, and, and, and she was in tears as, walking through that. And I'm like, uh, so that hit me, with it. It had been around like with other people I had talked to, but someone like emotionally how they felt about this. And then I started looking at like a lot of the how AI was being advertised out on, LinkedIn and social media, how a lot of the AI, leaders that are out there, how it was being advertised out. And I'm like, someone needs to write something. Someone needs to start putting things out for the term I will use is the AI survivalist now. I use the term the frontline employee, the people actually doing their jobs every day. All of this language, all of this presentation and marketing that's coming out, especially over the last couple of years, what is that doing to 79% of the employees and companies with that? Like, that messaging around it. And because of all my lived experience, and I know what the value of employees are, and why they do the things that they do with this, I'm like, someone needs to write what AI means from proximity, not from up
yeah,
here, not
yeah.
from the what ifs. I call like a lot of these books like what if, how to get ahead, how to do all these things. Let's talk about the now. Let's talk about reality. Let's talk about how people behave, with this around it. And and so I need to put and so I had all this stuff and it was like I think I have something here. Like I think what I wanted to communicate around business behavior in this transition AI, I think the language is here, the message is here with this that people need to hear. And so I started shaping things together to kind of see if there was, do I really want to write a book? Because to a certain extent, at this point, I had a whole bunch of white papers, if you really want to think
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
with it. But I'm like, but I don't have anything that I can come back to. White papers get spread across all over the place. I want something that people can come back to, because everything that I was talking about is like, it doesn't matter what if AI today or AI 10 years from now, the behavior is the same. Human behavior is the same. It's consistent over across the years, and the expectations and goals and challenges around that. So I'm like, I think I need to write a book. I had never done that, and 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 I don't know a lot of the mechanics around that, and then I started diving into the reality of what it costs to have people help you write a book on that, and I'm like, um, and so I was like, well, my company's not really asking me to do this, but I feel like someone needs to put something out there for reality on this for them, and to help educate leaders to understand, because especially frontline
Yeah.
leaders are in the thick of this as well. So so I started on it, and I told my wife, I was like, I think I need to do this. It's an itch that needs to be scratched. Someone needs to kind of counteract the messaging that's happening around AI in a more realistic basis, um, from a proximity aspect of this. And so I brought in, because I had a lot of human dynamics as a part of this. So I brought all this stuff in and I started making it happen. But I'm like, honey, we need a budget for this. I need to write this. It's not about me. Like, whatever success I get out of this, if any, because nobody may read it at all, with this. It may not resonate with people at all. But I need money to set aside to be able to make this happen. And so we made it work. This is really kind of a ground root standpoint, because, a lot of companies have, investors in,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to business books with it. This is all me. This is all coming from my family's budget to help people succeed and understand what this relationship with AI means for them. And, and I think the reality of it is, it doesn't hit them right away, because to a certain extent it's a self-help book, but it's a frame of mind and concept standpoint. When you go through it and you read it cover to cover, it doesn't, like, you connect through the whole book of everything that I'm talking about, but it doesn't connect until, like, you're like, I've had several people tell me this who's read the book cover to cover. They're sitting and doing something with AI and they suddenly stop, and it just hits them all at once. Like, everything that I talk about in the book, they're like, this is what he's been talking about the entire time. I need to change my complete relationship with AI, because I now understand what that needs to be. And so it's, so you get hooks and iterative with it, but it's more of like, I'm going to want to come back to this. I need to be reminded of this as these things change with this. And that's kind of the book that I wanted to put together.
So, David, to that end, perfectly segueing into this question. So, how did you structure the book? How did you want to lay it out for people to understand? Um, Obviously, I'm assuming it speaks to a layman like me and kind of helps build me up. But how did you put it together in a way that you could get your message out there? This one that you've been concerned that wasn't getting out there. How did you put it together? How did you lay it out?
Yeah. So it's kind of in three major segments with this. Um, so the first segment is understanding your relationship at work. You have to understand how you think and you behave, how your leadership thinks and behaves, and then how your organization thinks and behaves, and all the dynamics around that. People forget those dynamics. So people need to be reminded of what those dynamics are, because that's critical.
Yeah.
And then, it is an AI book, so I introduce AI aspects with that to, it's like, uh, I thought I'm reading an AI book. Sounds like just organizational behavior. And the reality is,
Yeah.
it is, with it. So now, then you get into the kind of the middle of the book where it's like AI has now entered this relationship, and so what does that mean? So you have all these dynamics. You have this organization and the employee. Now you have this third presence. You have AI in the organization, AI in the employee, and the employee in the organization. So it's like a triad aspect of this. So as with any organizations, it takes work and understanding to understand what that dynamic is going to be. And do you think, adopting AI is going to be instant? With any type of relationship, and this is a very intimate relationship because of the behavioral record, that is potentially discoverable with this. What does that mean? What does that look like with that? And trying to work that out so you can have the right mindset. Then it expands. So it's like organizationally. So what does this cultural change mean for an entire organization? How does a company should approach and think about, have the right frame of mind, as well as all the leaders with all of these dynamics with it? That's kind of where it wraps up to be, from it. But the end all be all is that the long run, AI and human is going to be a symbiotic relationship in the long run.
Yeah.
There's things that humans are always going to do well and excel in, and then there's things that AI is going to excel in, but they rely on each other. It's a relationship. They have to rely on each other in order to be effective. It's going to take a really long time to get to that point, to be as tight knit in order to be able to make it truly be effective for the everyday AI survivalist with that.
Yeah.
So
How did you structure the chapters? Some books will have exercises, definitions, questions to consider. This is kind of a tricky topic. So how did you structure it where they can do their learning? Do you prompt them to try certain things? How did you put it together so that they can kind of work towards uh, putting it into play in their lives and their work?
so the one challenging thing around the book is, so the book is not perfect with it. One thing is that I'm not a writer, and as far as in the traditional business writing sense,
Yeah.
I'm a solutionist with it. So I have a very distinct way of thinking and processing and explaining things with it. Um, Unfortunately, that resonates in the book a lot, with it. And so some people really like that, and some people, they're in more like traditional business writing type of aspects with it. But it's written in such a way. Oh, and the other constraint I had was, because of professionally, some of the things I do professionally, there's some frameworks or application or applied use of it I couldn't include in as a part of the book. So because it's more of a organizational psychology book, and more.
Yeah, and that's the reason I asked, just because I know it's very technical. It's a very technical topic, but it's not quite a manual. So I like hearing about how you found that balance of teaching at the same time, kind of providing that lesson. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's written such a way where it's like me trying to walk your mind through to like remind and come back to and kind of relive your thoughts around it. Because I actually have a book club right now that's pulling it apart. So they're going, chapter by chapter, breaking it apart, like analyzing when I talk about it. And it's very interesting because they're like, we can all relate to everything that he's talking about. It reminds us on how we behave at work. And so
Yeah.
it's a reminder. That's the biggest thing, is like, it's a lot of the stuff is a reminder of how you behave. Now you have that frame of mind there. So now AI has entered this. So what does your past experience around how your organizational dynamics and behavior works? Now AI enters that. What does that mean? Like, so I talk about what AI can do and it does not, and the relationship between the human and the AI relationship, working through all
Yeah.
of those dynamics. So it's a self-reflection tool into that end. And so some of the things is like, to kind of work that out yourself. It's more of you like I read through this and I'm going to sit and kind of think about it for a while, and then but as I said, like I think the impact of that is more of a downstream thing. Is like I want you to have the right frame of mind when you work with AI,
Yeah.
and what does that ultimately mean with that. And so it's less about step one, step two, step three, type of thing. It's more about conditioning.
Yes. Yes. Which I think is great because you obviously you mentioned the triad of in the workplace, the information, the person, the information, the organization. Um, so I think that's important because yeah, so many people have lost sight of that. They just jump to fear based on everything that they hear. So I like that connective tissue you're
Mm,
trying to provide between their fear and the role that they could have.
right.
David, for you, I'm curious. Obviously, this is your field. You specialize in this. What evolved in your thinking or you as a person from writing this book? Aside from the technical aspect of the writing, what changed in your thinking or the way that you approach the topic of the book based on putting it together, getting it out there? Any feedback you've gotten in the meantime or since you published it? Um, what's changed in you? How has your thinking changed from just that experience?
My thinking has been like I feel like um, I'm on the right message. So my thought process is the right message to begin with, especially from a front door standpoint when it comes to AI. And what it's changed for me is not so much the on the AI, it's the journey on trying to publish the message out. There's things that I've kind of discovered about myself through this journey, especially kind of going on podcasts like this and talking about it is like, where's my place in this? Where's my role in this? And I think while I have a brand, as I said, it's not about me, it's about everyone else, with this, but um I want people to recognize in themselves. And so I think the overall change really hasn't changed. It's just, getting more sophisticated or working through issues and challenges around that. It's more of like how do I apply that? Like how can I bring about real
Yeah.
change, through practice on some of this stuff. And that's what I do professionally on there. So, we have my our own separate frameworks around, those different types of things with it. But um, I think to a certain extent, it realizes that while I'm in line, I'm also kind of at odds as like an AI influencer, is because my message is very different than a lot of AI influencers out there around opportunity. And my message is that you need to self realize before you can actually bring about change.
Yeah.
And that's the whole aspect on that is like, and you've actually you've had several guests on your podcast talking about, failure, and the opportunity of failure when it comes to behaviors with this, and that creates lived experience around it. What I want to do is I want to help it, minimize those bumpiness with it. My book is saying, hey, here is a shortcut to real change with this in this AI world. If you want a shortcut, you need to understand behavior, and that should be your front
Mm,
door. Because, and I use this term
yeah.
a lot from an AI, if AI is if AI is designed to mimic human behavior, then make it human. And I don't think people do that. And that's where my
Yeah.
whole concept of the book is that make it human, especially the dynamics of humans around it.
Not to rush you, not seeing past this book, but I'm always curious the authors that I have on the show. What do you think in general your next writings will go into? What kind of field or area, book, whatever it may be?
I think I'm still figuring that out at this point. I'm uh I'll be honest, I kind of need help, from a writing standpoint with this. And it would be good to have like support and help out there. I think the biggest problem is I'm an idea guy. I have all kinds of stuff that has not been written that should be written around it,
Yeah.
especially around these dynamics with it. And I may not be the solutionist. I may not be the person that actually delivers the next step of this, but I may help inspire other practitioners out there to say, I like what he had to say. I like his way of thinking and how he's approached this around this relationship with AI. I'm going to make my own avenue with this, or I'm going to change my practice, or I'm going to approach this differently, with it. As I said, it's my goal around this book is to help others, whether it's professionally or just individually. It doesn't have to be me, as a part of this. But I still have a lot up here, that hasn't realized yet, with it.
Yeah.
But I would like to be able to do that in the future if I was given the opportunity to do so.
David, obviously, we're here talking about your book, but I'm always curious of the authors that I have here on the series. What is a book that's influenced you, impacted you the most? What stood out, changed your life or work or business, thinking?
Um, I don't actually think it's a book, in all honesty. The I would say it's kind of two genres with it. So me personally, I listen to a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, personally out there, and especially in like some of the lit RPG realms. There's some pretty amazing writing in the lit RPG realms out there with it from a story standpoint, with it, and and I think to myself, like, why do I listen to these or read these types of books with it? And it's a sense of escapism, with it. And why are we escaping? What are we trying to escape, from? And everyday life with it. So the book is what essentially is the unwritten book, which is all the stories that everyone has told me that's in their workplace dynamics with it. Every little story that I know of on how people do the work that they do, why they do that, you know, the emotions behind that. I think that's really the real story that people need to understand and listen to more, because
Mm,
that's where reality is built in. And I find that very rewarding because it's real, it's close to where it needs to be, and I want to keep hearing more of those because I want to help overcome those, or guide people relating to it. And I think that um that's what I want to focus in on continually, even after I retire, at some point of this. Those are the stories that matter, and that's the book that matters. So it's not one particular. There's a lot of good books out there that I've read and listened to with it, but I think my message is like that's the book. That's the book I want everyone to read and listen to.
yeah. No, I completely understand that. Um, that's making me think in real time. Just if I think about the medium that's really impacted the way that I think, that's helped me change exponentially. I do have my favorite book that stands out, but I mean, nothing has changed me more in life than listening to the stories of the people that I have on this series.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, I can't overstate it enough just how incredible it is. Even if people come in to talk about the same book or they've written a similar type of book, everybody's story is just fascinating.
Hmm.
It's not hyperbole to say every conversation has changed my life in some way,
Hmm.
tweaking the way that I think about this industry, that field, this skill, whatever it may be. So I appreciate the way that you broke down that question. And it's, you know, the question asked about a book, but that makes complete sense. David, in wrapping up, what are you up to these days? Is there anything else that you want to share or cover that I might not have asked about that you want to put out there? The floor is completely yours.
Yeah. So uh coming soon, I'm hoping by late July of 2026. I will have an audiobook version of my book. I think it's going to go over. I think people are going to find it I'm more preferential because, as I said, this book is really like me kind of explaining things to people and the thought process around it.
Yeah.
So when it's delivered through an audio standpoint, it may resonate more emotionally with people. And
Yeah, I think just to jump in, especially with this topic, the way you've broken it down, where it's like, okay, it's not a book about AI. AI is involved, but this is more about people self-reflecting, going back and understanding their role, their foundation, their behavior. I
yes.
think when you have that audiobook and if it comes from you, people will hear the urgency,
Hmm.
the care, the consideration in your voice
Hmm.
when they're listening to it. I think because there is that heavy human element to this book, I think audio is just great because that way you have a fellow human
Hmm.
breaking it down for you. So I mean, it sounds simple, but I think very effective.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's coming soon here. So hope I think people will very connect with it and listen to it. And then if people are interested in finding more about me, davidchristopherdean.com. That's where you can find out more information by me and also more about the book. The book is available in all major retailers, as well as ebook format. And as I said, the audiobook is coming out relating to it, and on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter on LinkedIn where I extend a lot of these conversations around what I talk about from the book from a downstream aspect. A lot of the articles are very insightful that people might find value on, still kind of understanding what this relationship dynamic means.
Amazing. And again, David shared his book and inbox between us. David, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down for this conversation.
I appreciate you having me, John. It was great.
It's awesome. If there's anything I might have missed, so much information, so little time, I know I'm going to think about follow up questions that I should have asked David while we were here. But if you do have anything you want me to reach out to him on, let me know and I'll reach out and see what kind of wisdom, guidance, insight, anything additional I can get back from David. In the meantime, thank you for watching, listening, and subscribing, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.